story of how my husband thought he could outsmart me. It began with whispers in the dark, unfamiliar bank transactions, and a name, Ilya Moreau, that I had never heard before. Michael, my husband, wasn't just planning to leave me, he was plotting to take everything, but he underestimated me. He thought I'd crumble. Instead, I moved first. I protected what was mine. 1 week later, his entire plan collapsed. What hurt most wasn't just the betrayal. It was the depth of his deception, how long he had been plotting, the lies, and the lengths he was willing to go to destroy me. I woke to an empty bed. The cold sheets told me Michael had been gone for a while. At first, I thought maybe he'd stepped out for water or to the bathroom. But as I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, a faint murmur caught my attention. His voice, low, careful, hushed. The hallway was dark, but a sliver of moonlight spilled through the window, casting shadows across the floor. My stomach twisted as I followed the sound. "Just a little longer. She doesn't suspect anything yet," Michael whispered. I froze mid-step. My heart pounded. His voice was smooth, reassuring. The kind someone uses to calm another person. Who was he talking to? I strained to hear more, but the words were muffled, barely above a whisper. This wasn't a late night work call. Michael never whispered on calls. My mind raced, running through worst-case scenarios. Footsteps approached. I barely had time to slip back into the bedroom before he rounded the corner. My pulse hammered as I slid under the covers, pretending to sleep. Minutes later, I felt the bed dip. His weight settled beside me, but I kept my breathing steady. He exhaled slowly, relaxed, as if nothing had happened. I turned to him, blinking. "Where were you?" My voice was soft, groggy. "Bathroom," he muttered. Casual, a lie. The phone call, his voice, the whispers, they all screamed deception. I stared at him, searching for a crack in his mask. Nothing. Michael met my gaze, unreadable, confident, untouchable. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it really was just work. But the phrase, "She doesn't suspect anything yet," lingered in my mind, gnawing at me. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to lie back silent, biding my time. Not tonight. Not yet. The next morning, I woke before Michael. He was still asleep, arm draped across the pillow where my head should have been. I slipped out quietly, barefoot, and padded to the kitchen, phone in hand. I didn't usually check our bank accounts. Michael managed most of the finances. But something felt off. Scrolling through recent transactions, my stomach sank. The 500 volans, 252 $2,000. A dozen withdrawals over the past 3 months, small enough to seem innocuous, but frequent enough to raise alarm. These weren't for bills or investments. They weren't for anything we had ever discussed. A shaky breath, hands trembling slightly, I froze as footsteps approached. Michael leaned against the doorway, rubbing his neck. "Morning," he mumbled, voice thick with sleep. "What's for breakfast?" I set my phone down, about to ask him the same question. He smirked, stepping forward to pour coffee. "Guess it's your turn," he said lightly. I watched him sip, free hand on the counter. My stomach tightened as I opened the banking app again. Michael froze for a half second, just long enough for his grip to tighten around the mug before forcing a casual chuckle. "Small investments," he said, shrugging. "Short-term gains. Nothing to worry about. Lies? I knew it. But why?" The rest of the day, unease followed me. Michael was glued to his phone, taking calls in another room. His screen always face down, walls of secrecy closing around me. That night, lying in bed, my mind refused to rest. Michael had always been confident, charming, persuasive. But I had been with him long enough to know when something was wrong, and something was very wrong. A voice whispered in my head, "Am I being paranoid, or is something truly off?" I turned to face him, already asleep, calm, innocent. That had always been his mask, but I was done believing it. The next morning, over breakfast, Michael casually suggested we organize our finances. Just in case of emergencies, he said. I froze, gripping my coffee mug. He'd never shown interest in my personal accounts before. Now, suddenly, he did. My mind raced. This wasn't about safety. It was preparation, concealment, control. That evening, Michael left his phone unattended. A notification lit up, Elia Morrow. Just make sure she stays in the dark. Almost there? My chest tightened. My hands hovered over the screen. Who was Elia Morrow? And what did almost there mean the rest of the night? I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a colleague, a business partner. But deep down, I knew. Michael's game was bigger than I had imagined, and I needed proof before I acted. I held my ground when he later asked me to sign over our assets. Calmly, I said, I'm not signing this. His calm facade cracked for a fraction of a second. But I didn't flinch. I was no longer the one being manipulated. By morning, I had taken control. I moved my assets, protecting everything. Michael's carefully plotted plans crumbled. The following morning, the question that had been gnawing at me still hung heavy in the air. Elia Morrow. Who was she? What had Michael been planning? I moved through my morning routine mechanically, my mind locked on that one name. Breakfast passed in tense silence, Michael's casual demeanor doing nothing to ease my suspicion. Babe, can you sign a few things real quick? He asked casually, pressing a document toward me. My pulse tightened. Legal jargon filled the pages, but it didn't take long to see the truth. A property transfer agreement. My assets, my savings, even our condo, all set to be moved into his name. I met his gaze, steady. I'm not signing this. Michael's smile twitched, jaw tightening. It's just precautionary, he said, smooth as ever. A legal convenience. Nothing changes between us. I placed the papers back on the counter, deliberate. Nothing changes. I echoed. You're asking me to hand over everything to you. Not everything, he said, calm, rehearsed. Just consolidating. Protection, in case something happens. I felt my hands tremble, not from fear, but rage. Months of planning, deception. And he had the audacity to sit across from me, pretending it was nothing. I realized in that moment the power had shifted. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to react emotionally. That night, Michael moved through the house like nothing had happened. He laughed at the TV, scrolled his phone, suggested ordering takeout, but I watched closely. The carefully constructed act, the doting husband routine, it all screamed manipulation. Then it happened. Michael left his phone unattended. Never in months had he done that. My pulse spiked as a notification lit the screen. Elia Morrow. Just make sure she stays in the dark. Almost there. My chest tightened. Fingers trembling, I slid the phone back onto the counter and sank into the couch. The water in the shower stopped, and Michael emerged, towel, drying his hair, calm and oblivious. I forced myself to speak lightly. Did you decide on dinner? Not yet, he said, casually unlocking his phone, no hesitation. But I knew better. By the next morning, I had a plan. I wasn't going to confront him blindly. If I was right, I needed proof, real proof. That evening, after careful observation, I moved all my assets into a secure trust. Michael's calculations, months of preparation, were about to collapse. The following day, a knock at the door. Sharp, measured, official. A man in a navy blazer handed me a thick envelope. Clara Keller, he asked, expression blank. My fingers tightened on the documents inside. It was a petition for dissolution of marriage. Michael wasn't just leaving. He wanted half of everything, spousal support included. My lips pressed together. He had been planning this for months, perhaps longer. Cold, calculated, ruthless. I called my lawyer, Patricia. Her eyes scanned the papers, a smirk barely hidden. Well, she said, tapping her nails against the desk. "He's got nothing. You moved everything into a trust before he filed. Legally, he has no access. He can try spousal support, but with your income compared to his, not happening." A slow exhale, relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control. Michael's game was crumbling, and I had underestimated no one. But he wasn't finished. Michael wasn't the type to walk away quietly. Within days, whispers started at work. Colleagues stared. Conversations stopped when I entered. My assistant, Rachel, hesitated before speaking. "There's a rumor. People are saying you took money from your joint accounts," she said, voice low. "They think you've been laundering funds." My blood boiled. Michael wasn't just trying to take money. He wanted to ruin me. "Patricia and I strategized. He wants you to react emotionally," she said. "Don't. If you react too fast, he wins." The courtroom was next. Michael, dressed sharply, smirked like a man certain of victory. His lawyer began, "Your Honor, my client believes Mrs. Keller improperly moved assets to avoid a fair divorce settlement. We request a full forensic audit of all financial transfers in the past 6 months." I didn't flinch. Patricia rose, calm and precise. "Your Honor, all financial moves were made prior to Mr. Keller filing for divorce. There is no mismanagement, no fraud. We request dismissal with prejudice and that Mr. Keller cover all legal fees." The judge reviewed the documents. Tension thickened the room. Michael's eyes searched mine for a reaction. I gave him none. Finally, the ruling came. The court finds no grounds for a full financial audit. Motion denied. Mr. Keller is responsible for all legal fees. I exhaled. Relief mingled with satisfaction. He had lost again. Of course, Michael had a last move. He filed a complaint with Ilia Morrow, accusing me of financial fraud. Patricia and Beatrice analyzed the documents and discovered the timestamps were forged. Many accounts didn't even exist at the time of the supposed transactions. I had the proof. I went on the offensive. We filed a motion proving the documents fraudulent and countersued for defamation and falsifying legal evidence. 2 weeks later, the courtroom was packed with tension. Patricia laid out the case with precision. The forensic analyst detailed manipulated numbers and false timestamps. Michael's lawyers squirmed. The judge finally ruled in my favor. Michael and Ilia were forced to withdraw their claims. All legal costs would be paid by them. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a rare calm. I whispered just loud enough for Michael to hear, "We done here." For the first time in months, silence followed me like a cloak. No court hearings, no threats, no waking in fear. I had won, not through fury, but through strategy, patience, and precision. 2 days later, a celebratory dinner with Patricia and Beatrice marked the closure. We toasted freedom, independence, and the lesson no one should underestimate me again. Standing on my balcony later that night, gazing at the city lights, I realized how much had changed. Trust had been shattered, time lost, illusions broken. But clarity, strength, and control were mine. The phone vibrated, unknown number. Blocked. A small smile curved my lips. I opened a blank document on my laptop. A new chapter, my story. Life tests us in unexpected ways. Sometimes betrayal comes from those we trust most. Strength isn't in avoiding betrayal. It's in rising after it. I could have crumbled. I chose to fight for my dignity, my freedom, my future. You are stronger than you think. Walk away from what no longer serves you. That is victory. Clara's journey ends here, but the lesson lingers. Stand strong. Stay smart. Never let anyone take your power. The weeks following the courtroom battles were quiet, but Clara knew better than to believe in calm. Michael had underestimated her, and men like him didn't walk away quietly. They regrouped, strategized, and tried again. But she was ready. Her mornings became her sanctuary, coffee in hand. She reviewed emails, checked on her businesses, and allowed herself a small sense of control she hadn't felt in months. Each notification that popped up on her phone no longer caused anxiety. It reminded her that she was still standing, still vigilant. Then came the final push. Patricia called early one morning. "Clara, they've filed a formal complaint," she said, voice tight. "Michael and Ilya are accusing you of financial fraud. They claim you've been falsifying records for months." Clara's stomach sank for a fraction of a second, then steadied. She had anticipated this. "Are their documents legitimate?" she asked. "Absolutely not," Patricia replied. "But someone doctored them well." They didn't notice one key detail. The accounts didn't exist when those transactions supposedly happened. A flicker of hope, a chance to end this once and for all. By the time Clara arrived at Patricia's office, the strategy was clear. She would go on the offensive, not just to clear her name, but to crush the lies. A forensic analyst confirmed the tampered evidence, and the plan was set: countersue for defamation and falsifying legal documents, demanding full damages. 2 weeks later, Clara faced Michael in court for the final time. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Michael sat confidently, smirk in place, unaware of how tightly the news had been drawn around him. Patricia presented the case meticulously. Every forged timestamp, every manipulated figure, every fabricated claim laid bare before the judge. Michael's lawyers shifted nervously, realizing the tide had turned. Finally, Patricia placed a thick folder on the judge's desk. "Your Honor, in light of these fraudulent accusations, my client is countersuing Mr. Michael Keller and Ilya Morrow for defamation and submission of falsified legal evidence." Silence. The kind that presses against your chest and holds your breath captive. Michael's jaw tightened. His confident mask was slipping. The ruling was swift, motion dismissed. All legal costs would be borne by Michael and Ilya. The courtroom exhaled, but Clara's relief was private, deep. Victory wasn't loud. It was strategic, precise, and complete. Walking past Michael on her way out, Clara whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "We done here?" He didn't respond. There was no glare, no sneer, just the realization that his game had ended. And Clara, for the first time in months, felt peace. Back at home, the silence was different now. Not heavy, not anxious, but calm, restorative. She poured herself a glass of wine and settled onto the balcony, the Chicago skyline stretching endlessly before her. Lights twinkled like tiny reminders that life moved on, that moments passed, and that storms eventually ended. She reflected on the months of deception, manipulation, and betrayal. She had lost time, trust, and the illusion of safety, but gained far more clarity, strength, and control. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She didn't hesitate. Blocked. A small smile tugged at her lips. Opening her laptop, she started a blank document. A new chapter. Her story in her words. "Clara knew something vital. Life tested us in the moments we least expect. Often, the deepest betrayal comes from those we trust most. Strength isn't about avoiding it. It's about how you rise after." She could have crumbled. She could have given up when the whispers, the lies, and the legal threats started. But she didn't. Instead, she chose to fight for her finances, her dignity, her freedom, and her future. Now, Clara's lesson to anyone listening, reading, or watching: you are stronger than you think. Walking away from what no longer serves you isn't weakness. It's the ultimate victory. A few days later, she met Patricia for the last time. The final stack of settlement papers was in front of her. Dean, excuse me, Michael, had nothing. Not a single claim succeeded. All legal fees were his responsibility. Clara ran her fingers over the documents, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. "How do you feel?" Patricia asked, leaning back with a satisfied smile. "Lighter," Clara replied, letting out a soft laugh. relief mingled with triumph. Later, she celebrated with Beatrix and her mother. Margot greeted her with a hug, eyes full of relief. "It's over," she whispered. "Yes," Clara murmured, smiling. Beatrix raised a glass of champagne. "To freedom," she said, grinning. "And to never letting a man think he can outsmart you again." Clara clinked her glass against hers, laughter spilling freely. "I'll drink to that." That night, standing on the balcony again, Clara felt transformed. She was no longer the woman who ignored warning signs. No longer the woman who trusted blindly. She had lost much, but she had gained far more strength, control, and the knowledge that she could survive, thrive, and rise above betrayal. She closed her laptop, whispered softly to herself, "This is my story now." The lessons were clear. Life may throw its worst at you, but it is in those moments that you discover who you truly are. Betrayal may wound, but it can never define you. Strength is revealed in the choices you make after the storm. Clara's voice echoed in her own thoughts. If you've ever been blindsided, if you've ever felt the ground pulled from beneath you, know this: you are not alone. Life will test you, but your response defines you. Protect yourself, trust your instincts, and never let anyone take your power. The war was over. Victory wasn't loud, flashy, or filled with fireworks. It was quiet, deep, and absolute. And Clara, resilient, intelligent, and unstoppable, knew one thing for certain: she had reclaimed her life, her freedom, and her story. An end of story, empowering closing. Clara emerges victorious, wiser, and in full control of her life. Betrayal tested her, but she responded strategically, never impulsively. The story leaves a clear message: strength is in rising, not in avoiding pain. Full circle reflection reinforces her journey from vulnerability to empowerment.